a closed session. We have one item, 4.1, committee vacancies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion for the one item of council reporting out of closed session is that the report be received and that confidential direction to staff be confirmed.
Thank you. Someone like to move? Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Kim. Comments, questions? Court of vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Court vote has been requested for the only item of council reporting out of closed session. Councillor Gartner, how do you vote?
You're on mute, Councillor.
I'm sorry, are you calling it in two sections?
We can't split direction coming out of closed session.
Then I will have to vote against.
Okay.
Mayor Maracus?
Yes.
Councillor Kim?
Yes.
Councillor Kim votes yes. Councillor Humphreys? Councillor Humphreys votes yes. Councillor Gilliland? Councillor Gilliland votes yes. Councillor Gallo?
No.
Councillor Gallo?
No.
Thank you.
And Councillor Thompson?
Yes.
Councillor Thompson votes yes. The motion carries.
Thank you. Confirming bylaw. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Humphreys, second. Seconder. Confirming bylaw. Councillor Thompson, thank you. Oh, sorry. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Kim, Councillor Thompson, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Clerk, time is 7:02. I will call this general committee meeting to order. Council, Councillor Gartner is supposed to be in the chair. She is joining us virtually, so therefore I will be chairing unless there are any objections. Seeing none. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, meetings will be available to the public via live stream only on the town's YouTube channel. To participate electronically, please visit aurora.ca/participation. Before we start, I'd like to start by acknowledging that the land on which we live and work is the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, whose presence here continues to this day. Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaties First Nations. We acknowledge and thank them for sharing this land with us. A shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and of how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Council, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Humphreys, seconder. Councillor Gardner. Any comments or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. We have no community presentations. We do have one delegation, 5.1, Marco Di Girolamo. Marco, I said it wrong. I apologize. Resident and regarding encroachment agreement with the town. Marco, are you there?
I am. Thank you.
Welcome, Marco. Just if you can just state your name and then you'll have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Marco Dedravemo and I live at 76 Claw Square. I recognize I only have 5 minutes, so I'll be as brief as possible or before my kids come bursting through the door. First, I want to thank everyone for providing me with the opportunity to share my situation with you today. In the spring of 2020, my partner and I made the decision to build an additional structure adjacent to our swimming pool. The structure itself is approximately 16 feet by 29 feet, and it sits along my neighbor's fence line. Once we decided to build a structure in our haste to complete the project and having a general understanding of building requirements, we built it without a permit with the confidence that it would be built to a high standard and there would be no issues with it. We do not have any neighbors behind us, and we have neighbors to the side of us. Our property is very heavily treed. In retrospect, I realized it was a mistake to build it without seeking a permit and regret doing so. However, to further complicate the issue, once the town became aware of the structure and I applied for a permit, it was discovered that there was an easement on my property that I was not aware of, and the structure is encroaching on the easement by about 1.5 meters. I recognize this is an error on my part, but moving the structure would be a significant cost to be incurred by my family. I have indicated that I will absolutely provide clear access if it becomes necessary, but I'm hoping that I will not have to tear down the structure unless it is necessary for the town to access the easement area. I have discussed potential solutions and issues with town staff, and have provided assurance that if an issue arises, I would provide clear access and immediate access at my cost alone and at no cost to the town. It is my understanding that staff had concerns and were reluctant to enter into an agreement with me. As a result, I reached out to Councillor Thompson to describe the situation and discuss what, if any, options were available to me. My understanding is that Councillor Thompson spoke with Mr. Waters, your Director of Planning, and he responded and advised me that I should seek an encroachment agreement with staff, but they would require direction from Town Council. So here I am today, and I'm prepared to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Marco. Council, first, can I get someone to move receipt of the delegation? Councillor Thompson, second. Councillor Humphreys, any comments or questions? Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you. Hang on a minute. Is this spelled right, Marco? Is your name spelled right here? Di Girolamo?
Di Girolamo.
Girolamo. Oh, okay. Some Italian background. I haven't heard it pronounced that way. So I just wanted to say thank you for coming tonight, for delegating. And so basically, you have a structure that's built on an easement, and that's an encroachment of the town. Since you've been there, have you been asked to have access or anything like that from staff?
I've never had the town ask me for access to the property.
Councillor?
To you, Mr. Mayor, how did this come up? Did you you built something, you didn't realize you were building it in that area? Is it just
there was an existing building that was rotted away,
oh,
and we had torn it down and just rebuilt it
Built
slightly
another
larger
one.
than the existing building.
Councillor?
okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I would I'll probably ask the staff at the time just how this, well, I want to thank you very much for allowing, it looks like a good structure from what I can understand. And if the town does need access, that you'll allow, through an agreement, you'll allow access for the town to utilize the area to do whatever they need to do. There isn't a problem with that. Should that happen in the future?
Marco?
I have no issue having the town access the property should they need to access the area in question.
Okay, thank you very much, through Mr. Mayor. I've got some questions that's coming up later on for staff, but I'm okay with this, Mr. Mayor. I know of an area right now that there's a resident who's got an easement that their neighbor filled a swell up, and we're not demanding them to do anything. So I have no problem with this issue at all. These things happen once in a while, and it looks like the resident's fine with allowing staff to go through if they need to. Thank you so much for coming, delegating this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Marco, for being here. Similar to Councillor Humphreys, just want to confirm your willingness to address any issues that the town may have through this encroachment agreement. Sorry,
Marco?
through you, Mr. Mayor, to Marco.
Marco?
100% the town can access the property should they need to access the agreement at any time.
Councillor?
Thank you. And with regards to moving the structure, what are some of the biggest challenges to being able to do that?
Marco?
Considering the size of the structure and to have it moved, we would incur significant costs. It'd have to be raised, a new concrete pad poured, and then moved off the encroachment by 1.5 meters.
Councillor?
Thank you very much, Marco. Just a quick comment. I did have the luxury of speaking with Mr. Waters in detail with regards to this particular situation. He provided me with a fair bit of background. So what I'd like to do tonight is just under new business, ask that this matter be referred to staff come back with a report so that all of council can have the same amount of information regarding the background, the history, and so forth. And then we could deal with this issue in more detail once everybody has the particulars at a future meeting. So that'll be my intent under new business, to put forward that motion, that it be referred to staff, and a report come forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Gardner, and then Councillor Gallo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm fine. I like Councillor Thompson's idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo.
Thank you. I'm a little confused. Councillor Humphreys had mentioned that there's something coming up in the agenda, and I just don't see it in the agenda.
No, there's nothing coming. I think she's just, I was going to make mention of that, say that I don't see anything as well, but I think she just said that. So Councillor Gallo, yeah, nothing's coming. I think that Councillor Thompson has just stated that he'll bring something under new business to ask for a report or something to come back to us.
Okay, can I just?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
To Councillor Humphreys, I was confused as to, were you going to bring something up, or what were you referencing?
Councillor Humphreys?
I saw, I thought I had misread because it said delegations 5.1, and I realized it was just an itemized. I thought I may have missed it in my reading, but there's nothing. So my mistake. I thought there was going to be discussion about it, and I thought I had just missed it with my own research tonight. So there's nothing. My apologies.
Councillor? No?
Okay, that's fine. I'm happy to support a staff report to come back to us and see how it best resolve this.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, Marco, thank you very much for coming. And I'm assuming you'll be notified if a report is coming, and if that's the direction that we go under new business. Okay.
Thank you very much, guys.
You're welcome. You have yourself a good evening.
You too.
Call the vote. All those in favor? Receipt? Yes, to receipt. Opposed? That carries. Council, nothing on the consent agenda. Advisory committee meeting minutes. We have two items. Ask a motion to approve receipt for information for both those items. Anybody? Councillor Gilliland, Councillor Kim. Is there anyone wanted a comment on those, or question, or pull any of those? Otherwise, I'm going to move forward with that motion. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move to items requiring discussion, our regular agenda. Start with 8.1. Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Action Plan 2021-2024. We have a presentation to be provided by Dr. Jalal, Principal Consultant representing LifeWorks. Doctor? Welcome. Nice to see you again.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Lovely to be here. Thank you all very much. I'm just going to go ahead and screen share our slides. Wonderful. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good to see some familiar, I was going to say faces, but more like names, given our current format. Thank you all very much again. I've had the pleasure of working with a number of you this year on some very important work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and I've had the opportunity to support the town of Aurora with building a strategic action plan. So in my very limited time, I would like to go through a quick few slides on just the highlights of what we did. And first of all, all, the plan was developed not just with input from external organizations and best practices, but also with your voices. And I think that's what's really, really important with any of this work, that all of us give our voice in how we move forward with it. So I had the opportunity, the pleasure of meeting 8 of you and within the organization and speaking to you about what was important to you, what you thought some of the challenges were, what you thought some of the opportunities were, and we were able to embed that within the strategic plan, as well as data collecting is very important. So I had access to your employee engagement survey, and there were components of that survey as well that I was able to use in developing this plan. So thank you so much to all of you for your time and for your voice, and in a very, very important document for the town. Very quickly, the purpose. As we transition from a very different time with the changing communities that we live in, the changing towns, the changing cities within our province, it's very important for us to acknowledge what diversity is and what equity looks like and fairness looks like and what inclusion means for everyone who lives within our town. So really the question here was, how do we transition from valuing these things, which all of us do, to actualizing them? So the strategic plan was meant to put in place what all of us want to see. We want to see diversity celebrated. We want to see inclusion within our organization. We want to make sure that the voices of everyone within our town and within our organization are heard. So it was really about the actualizing. How do we ensure that the diversity of our workforce really mirrors the community that we serve? And Aurora, as all of us know, is not the same Aurora that it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Just as the country and the province is changing, so is our town. And it's very, very important that this work happens in order for us to be on target in supporting everyone who lives in our town. So there were a number of areas that we really looked at. And more than anything, we wanted for all of this work to be commissioned and encouraged from the tone at the top. So all of you, mayor and council and so forth. And so today when I jumped on this call, I noticed that you had the Indigenous acknowledgement. And I don't know if you've always had that before, as one of our colleagues, Dimitri, was sharing with me. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate that we are looking at our surroundings and learning and educating ourselves and making those changes that make a tangible difference. So thank you so much for ingraining that in your practices now. And really, as the statement here says, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that acronym and how that lives in all of us has to be a part of Aurora's everyday culture. So not just specific work for specific agenda items, but really infused in everything that we do. So I wanted to today very quickly, because I won't have a chance to present the whole plan to you, I wanted to share with you the 8 areas that the plan represents. And all of you, of course, have exposure to the plan in order to be able to delve further into it. So the 8 areas that we looked at, first of all, commitment from the top, which we have and which we're so grateful for, really defining for Aurora what that looks like. Is it verbal support from all of you who are at the top? Is it supporting in other tangible ways? Is it in actions? Is it in activities? Is it in coming up with new policies or programs? Is it a combination of all of these things? So really looking at all of our leadership styles and our leadership competencies and defining for ourselves what inclusive leadership looks like, because it's very, very important. So an important component of the plan, as you will see, is that commitment from the top. And what is it that we who are at the top have to do in order to make this plan work, and how do we support that work? The second part of it was the recruitment. Who is invited into the town? Who do we hire? Who do we promote? Who do we not? And so really looking at our recruitment, looking at, first of all, our people and who we have, and then seeing if this mirrors the communities that we serve. As I just mentioned, Aurora today is very different from what Aurora was 5, 10, 15 years ago, and it will continue to be different. And so with that, our organization on the inside must look like what the communities are outside, who we are serving on the outside. So a part of the strategy focuses on recruitment, in how we do that and how we do that well to make sure that the town attracts people from all different groups, from groups that have never been represented before, from groups that have never come forth before. And how do we make sure that we have everyone and the door open wider than we ever have before? employee retention. As we open the door for more people and people who've never been there before, we want to make sure that we have a culture within the town that keeps people here. Our town and our organization is what it is because of our people. And we really want to make sure that people know that people know that they're valued, that people know that they have a voice, that people know that they belong here at the town of Aurora, and that this is their town, this is their organization. And so with that, we have to think of retention, and we have to think about how we become the kind of organization and continue to. There's so many things at Aurora currently that are wonderful, and how do we continue to build on each one of those, and how do we continue to build new components of it in order to make sure that the culture of the organization is one that attracts diversity in all of its different forms, and that really keeps people, the people that we work so hard to get, within our organization and growing within our organization and happy in our organization and contributing to our town in their fullest capacity. Training and development. Very important that all of us continue to educate ourselves. There is no end date to education. There is no, I've taken one workshop and I've learned everything that I can. So when it comes to issues of diversity and equity and inclusion and anti-racism, we constantly have to be learning. When it comes to cultural competency, we constantly have to be learning about how we can do things better, how we can learn about other groups, how we can make sure that our knowledge is consistent and continuing in a way that we can support our staff base and our town in our fullest capacity. So when we think about this, we have to think about training and development, and in terms of what do we provide for our staff? What do we provide for our council members? What do we provide for all of our stakeholders in terms of being on top of what kind of language we use, what kind of attitude we propel, and really making sure that the shared vision that the town has of being a diverse, inclusive, equitable organization in town is spread out throughout, and that everyone knows what that means, that all of us are speaking a similar language. Marketing, advertising, and communication. Everything that the town does has to reflect its values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So are we looking at our initiatives and our work and our organization and our mandate and our projects and programs through that lens? And there's a specific lens that we have to look through so that diversity, equity, and inclusion are not separate to everything else that we do, rather that it is infused in everything that we do. It is a part of every decision that we make, and it becomes so commonplace and so second nature to us. So thinking about the town, and is the branding of the town inclusive? Is it welcoming to everyone, or does it send out a message that Aurora is the type of place for one population or the other, and a certain type of people are welcome? We want to make sure everyone is welcome. Ontario is a very, very diverse province, the second most diverse in our country. So we really have to make sure that we represent that on the inside, in our culture, in physically who we have, in our projects and our initiatives, and definitely in our advertising, our communications, and all the different channels that we communicate in. So not just a newsletter or not just a website, but across the board. And one of you had an excellent example of saying, can we use real examples? Whenever we're talking about branding and we're talking about what kind of pictures do we put out there, what kind of messaging do we, one of you had the great idea of saying, what about using real examples with people's permission, of course. So I've loved all of the ideas that all of you have had, and I really hope that each one of those pieces are turned into initiatives that go forward. Number 6, strategic DEI-focused partnerships. No one can do this work alone. We cannot come up with initiatives and be successful and be the most welcoming of towns and make sure everyone belongs if we're just going to stick to our silo and just work within ourselves and the people who we've always worked with. We need to spread out and make sure that we have partnerships and relationships with everyone, with as many people as we've had before, plus all the people that we have not had partnerships with before. So looking at the town and seeing what organizations have popped up. What groups have we not had representation with before? What groups have we not had a voice at? If we have our table, who is sitting at that table and who is not sitting at that table? So making sure that we have cross-sectoral capacity and we have relationships with organizations who've never come forth before that we seek out to and say, can we work together? Can we support you? Can you come sit at our table and give us ideas on how we can be more exclusive and inclusive as a town? So really looking at that multi-level collaboration in its fullest, most respective sense to say, how do all of us work together and how do we build a partnership that's going to last the test of time and is going to be sustainable? Number 7 is data collection on our plan. And this is extremely important. I mean, I speak from I wear a researcher hat. So again, of course, this is personal to me in terms of really valuing research, but I feel like it's very important that all of us recognize the importance of data. When we come up with policies and programs and initiatives, I want for us to be able to come up with something tangible that stands strongly on data. I want us to be able to come up with things that people, if they ask us, how come you have this? We can say we have this because we're addressing ABC needs. So our data has been collected. We know what we have. We know what we don't have. We know what our gaps are. We know what our strengths and weaknesses are. And based on that, we're going to make sure that the data that we collect is used for the initiatives that we create. And so really making sure that all of us are very consistent in and very encouraging of collecting this data so that the town of Aurora can continue to be a place of progress. It can be a place where people continue to grow and a place where we continue to grow in the areas that we need to because we have data to support this. And accountability, of course, is, I think, not just a piece on its own, but throughout everything that we do. Who owns diversity, equity, inclusion at the town? Who owns the anti-racism initiatives at the town? And the answer is all of us. All of us that are a part of the town own these initiatives. Oftentimes we will put it onto the tone at the top, or we'll just make sure that certain people who have a certain title are responsible for all of the work. And oftentimes it's not how it can be done in the most successful way. So we want to make sure that accountability lies with all of us. Of course, the leadership team is going to have its role. Of course, the mayor and the council are going to have their role, but all of us as staff, as pieces of this organization, of this town, are going to have our pieces as well. So I really wanted that to be the last initiative that we have to tie everything else together, to say that this work belongs to all of us. If we're going to have an organization and a town that celebrates diversity, that welcomes people from all backgrounds, regardless of race or culture or creed or religion or linguistic ability or disability or so forth, if we're going to have an organization where we all belong, where we all have a seat at the table and where we all have a voice that can be heard, then absolutely we need to make sure that all of us take accountability in our respective pieces. And so with that, I don't think I've spoken this fast in a long time. Hope I haven't gone over time, but any questions that I can add, that I can answer for anyone.
Thank you, Doctor. Just first, Council, the recommendation is that report number CS 21056 be received. 2, that Council endorse the recommendations contained in the attached Town of Aurora Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Action Plan 2021 to 2024. And 3, that staff present the draft Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Action Plan 2021 to 2024 to the Anti-Black Racism and Anti-Racism Task Force for review and input. And 4, that staff report back on the progress of the strategy at a future council meeting. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Kim, second by Councillor Thompson. Any comments or questions to the presentation or to the report? Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Doctor, for presenting. It was good to see you again, and it was a great report. My question to you is, how many other municipalities in Canada are in the same situation where, you know, we've hired you to do a study for us and a report? So how many municipalities are we looking at across Canada? Are they thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and how many after the report have actioned it, and what were the results? Do you do a post look back?
Doctor?
Thank you so much, Councillor Kim, for the question. Lovely to see you again. I think you've asked a very, very important question. And in terms of currently, what other municipality am I working with? I have a contract with the City of Toronto as well for trainings and for development. In terms of how many towns and cities across the country are doing this work, many. So I don't have a specific number as of today in order to say this or that, but I have to say that diversity, equity, inclusion, and especially anti-racism combined with all of that has been one that in the past 5 years has been actively on the agenda for towns and cities across the board. In terms of the pre and the post, I really appreciate that you say that, because when you say, are we checking in with people afterwards, it really depends on each contract and each case by case situation in terms of whether they're doing that piece by externally hiring us out to support them, or whether internally they're looking at what their progress has been. But what's really, really important that Councillor Kim, you've mentioned, is that that piece cannot be missed. That when we have initiatives and when we have a strategic plan that all of us are agreeing to and moving ahead with, we have to make sure that evaluation happens. And evaluation is key in terms of seeing what has progressed. It's key in terms of seeing what hasn't progressed. So while oftentimes I may not be a part of all organizations in terms of being there physically as they collect their pre and post data, I can tell you that it's become a very important part of organizations, towns and municipalities, alongside government organizations, alongside corporations and corporate and nonprofit and social and so forth. And so sectors across the board, in making sure that the initiatives that they take are measured to say what has worked and what hasn't. Because as you say, Councillor Kim, if we are able to measure what hasn't, then we can say this is what we can adjust and this is what we can tweak, and we can make sure that in the next year that comes, we can change our initiatives to fit in the gaps with whatever didn't work in the past.
Thank you. And, like you spoke about data, I mean, it's so critical to have data and track it. Yes. Otherwise, you don't know how we're doing 3-5 years down the road. And you're right. This is, diversity is a theme that's trending upwards, and it's accelerating. Whether it's in the business community and they call it environmental, social, and governance, or whether it's just from an HR and hiring practices perspective, it's something that's critical. And I look forward to another report down the road where I'm sure other municipalities and corporations are looking at, what worked, what didn't, and I'm sure with each region, it has its own characteristics as well. Thank you for working with us, and we look for actioning these items.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you for being here this evening, your presentation, and certainly all the work you've done. I really just have a comment. I am a fan of Drucker's, and I certainly loved your quote in there with regards to culture eating strategy. And I think the development of a culture of any organization is critical to certainly their success. And, usually when I'm referencing Drucker, I talk about what gets measured, gets managed, and you were just talking about the importance of measuring. But, I'm certainly excited of the groundwork being done here and the ability to continue to build upon and grow the culture of our organization, because I think it is so essential. And so thank you again for your work. I look forward to the task force input and the continuation of this path. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just repeating what my colleagues have said. I think the timing's right. The content is right on. We need to do this. It's so important now more than ever. And the more that we can train and learn and really have those values, those visions, the mission values understood for all employees and staff, and it just rolls out to our community. So thank you very much for doing this, and looking forward to hearing about the reports as we go along. And as I go through here, it's very, very important. All these areas are very important for us to work on, and I want to thank you for your help in getting us there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. I appreciate the report and the level of detail that you did provide for us. So I really look forward to the continuing evaluation. I've had this conversation before with people about diversity and inclusion, and in conversations we talk about how it's very important to communicate the value of every person, and it is up to leaders to ensure that everybody knows that they're important. Every communication, decision, any interactive initiative should be guided through all these core values that we're speaking about tonight. And, anyone can complete a goal or a task or an experience, but it's how you do it that matters. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve tonight is really stick to those core values. And this is actually laying that out for us to follow. So I really do thank you for that. I do have one question on the report, just to get a little bit of clarity. I was curious about the new technology to digitize the recruitment process. And brackets, you have applicant tracking system. I thought that was quite intriguing. I like the fact that there is conducting blind evaluations without regard for gender, name, place, or origin. I thought that was quite interesting. And I was wondering if you could kind of touch on that kind of technology, and if you have some experience with that, you can share.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of you for your encouraging words. It puts a big smile on my face to see how well received this report was, and I really appreciate it. And I'm very excited to see what goes forward, and I know big things will go forward. To answer your question, absolutely, there are so many strategies out there, and technology is here to support a lot of those initiatives and strategies as well. And one of the ones that I'd mentioned was the one on the hiring practices. As we look to build a town with staff from groups that have never been represented before, there's two things that we can think about. One, have we on purpose not hired people from certain groups? And oftentimes that's not what the case is, because each one of us will do our best to hire the best person. Oftentimes what kicks in is unconscious bias. And I talk about the concept of unconscious bias in my trainings for all of you who have been a part of any of my trainings ever, to really hear about what unconscious bias does to hiring decisions. And many times decisions are made whereas we aren't thinking we have bias, but the outcome of it ends up being, and then we end up continuing to have a team, organization, department, town that looks the same as it always has. So technology exists now where we can pick and choose certain aspects of a person's diversity in order to be able to support us with this unconscious bias. So for example, if let's say at the town, we decide that we don't need to know what people's names and ethnicity and backgrounds are. And of course, a name carries a lot of weight. A name tells us about oftentimes an ethnicity or a background or a religious background, a gender, a number of defining factors that can cause unconscious bias. So when we think about that, if we take off the name off an application and say, I apply to the town of Aurora tomorrow, and people don't see a Dr. Nafisa Jalal, but they only see my credentials, at least one piece of that bias perhaps unconsciously is taken out so that no one can see my gender or my ethnicity, my culture, my race, any of the big factors that oftentimes end up being discriminating towards people, being causes of prejudice for people. A lot of organizations will say they don't have a problem with the name, but there may be other aspects of a person's application that they will choose they will program the technology to say, we'd like to take off this, or we'd like to take off the name of a university or an Ivy League program because we don't want to be biased towards only hiring from A school or B school or C school. So really these technologies are at our fingertips now. And there's many ways in which we within HR teams can work to say, how do we do these small things that are inexpensive completely in order to be able to support us in making better hiring decisions, knowing that all of us carry unconscious bias. Not all of us may be biased towards the same groups of people, but all of us do carry some level of bias. It's human nature and innate in many ways. So these technologies and these small strategies and methods really support us in doing our job better, in making sure that we can take out things that really are not relevant to a person's qualifications anyway. And in that turn, see if that opens the door. And like Councillor Kim had emphasized on the data collecting, really important because data speaks to what we've done. So if we do end up, and I hope that some of you will end up using some of these strategies, and if you do it for a year, and then at the end of the year, we can say, what has evolved? Has anything changed? And if we are to look at our staff base now, does it look perhaps even slightly different from what it did before we used the strategy? Yes, okay, well then maybe this is something that we need to continue to do with our HR practices. No, well then let's amend that to see what would work better. So I really appreciate that you took note of this technology and this method really, because organizations across the board, I think especially over the past 5 years that I've seen more than ever before, have been engaging in this to say, what can we take out from applications during a hiring practice to support all of us, knowing that we as people, as the best of people, can still make unbiased and can make biased decisions and help us make more unbiased decisions.
Councillor?
That's great. Thank you so much. Look forward to it.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, I did.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I echo what everybody else has said. It is a comprehensive strategic plan, and under each of the 8 goals, there's there's a lot of work to be done. There are a lot of directives given and a tremendous amount of work. And, you know, we're starting with whatever our corporate philosophy is, whatever our core values are. And I think I hope they're better than other municipalities' core values, but we still have a lot of work to do. So actually the reading of it was a bit overwhelming about all the work we have to do. So how do you see this unfolding? How do you see us getting to the end goals with respect to time and work that the whole organization has to put in?
Doctor?
Thank you so much. I appreciate the question, and a very, very, very important one at that. These strategic plans are wonderful documents, and I'm sure everyone can read them and stand by them and sign off on them. But really, what's the most important of all of this is how does the work get done? And so with that, I encourage all of us to internally sit down, whether it be in the committee, whether it be in the task force, whether it be a combination, to be able to say, what can we start with? All 8 of the areas that I've recommended are all very important. Are all 8 going to be handled all at once right away tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock? I wish, but that's not how things are going to be, because people are not available to jump on these initiatives right away. Finances are not always available right away to jump on any initiative that might have a dollar amount tied to it and so forth. So what we are going to have to do is sit down internally and say, which one of these is the most important to us? And so perhaps then out of the 8, we say, can we start with 2? Can we start with perhaps maybe the recruitment piece, and then perhaps another piece that we think is manageable or we think is most important, and we start with that. And we say, okay, in the first quarter of the first year or within the first 6 months, these are the initiatives that we start with. And we measure how that works. And then once we're comfortable with that and it becomes a part of our day-to-day and no longer external work, then we can introduce a 3rd initiative. And then we can do another one after that. So the most important thing is that we start. The most important thing is that we don't get intimidated by the amount of work that we have, which clearly is a lot, and not just for the town of Aurora, but for every single organization that I work with. There is so much room for improvement for all of us. But to be able to say, at the town of Aurora, all of us are in consensus with the fact that this requires the most attention, or these 2 things or these 3 things require the most attention. So we're going to invest our time and energy into this. And then once these are on its way going, a part of our processes and systems, we add in a 3rd one, we add in a 4th one. And then we make sure, of course, that we evaluate each one as we're going along so that we can tweak things as we need to. And of course, I'm available and happy to come in at any point when something's been done to say, can we measure this together? Can I look at the data? Can we adjust this, or this part of this worked and this part of it didn't? How can we do this differently? And then I can make another suggestion to say, okay, well, let's tweak this and let's try this, or other areas or other cities or other towns are doing this. I wonder if that would work in Aurora. It is very much a trial and error. There is nothing to say exactly how everything is going to play out, but what we do want to do is take some of these initiatives home and start with them, and really not think about starting with all 8, because it's not going to happen, but rather prioritizing perhaps even 2, to say in the coming foreseeable future, we're going to start with these 2. Are these 2 the most important that we have consensus around the table with? And if yes, that's where we start. And of course, keeping the accountability piece always in mind, not as a separate initiative, but making sure accountability exists in all of the other initiatives that we take.
Councillor?
Thank you. A good answer. Appreciate it. You have experience, and you've written this. Do you have any idea how much time this would take to really have a corporate culture that would reflect all 8 points?
I love that question. I do. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. I wish I could give you a numerical. It looks very, very different from organization to organization based on where you currently are. So there are organizations where I will go into where they've been doing some of this work for years, and then these initiatives then hit home with them differently, because it's about embedding something or changing something or revising something that they're existingly doing. For an organization for whom some of these initiatives are completely new, it really will depend on how many people you have on board, what that's going to look like. For example, the recruitment piece, if we were to say, how are we going to jump on the recruitment piece to make sure that we open the doors to people who've never been a part of our family before? That piece is a big one. Oh, sorry, yes. Was I interrupting something you were saying? Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, I don't know how many people we have to recruit in a year. We may have nobody, we may have one person. So that could be a long process.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, then you might think, do we want to start with this initiative, or do we still want to start with one of the other ones? If we find that we're an organization that hires a lot of people, some of the organizations I work with hire hundreds of people a year. So for them, this becomes a very big one because these are big numbers. It really impacts the cultural change, and it impacts who is a part of the organization, what the organization looks like and feels like. So for yourself, if you're feeling like at the town of Aurora, the hiring is not in large numbers at the current time, then perhaps we just hold on to that one and we say, what is another one that we can pull on that we think is more persistent, is more important, is more urgent, and then we start with that. And so that, again, that makes a big difference as well. All of these pieces together will eventually lead to a cultural change, whether it be the recruiting or the retention. And the retention piece, I feel, is very, very important as well, because you already have a staff base and you have people working at the town, and brilliant people at that as well. And I've had the privilege of meeting a number of them. We want to make sure perhaps that we start with that to say, does everyone feel like they belong? If I were to sample out different people from your team, could I say that people are comfortable, that people feel like this is a place where they feel at home, where they can be themselves, where they can be open about who they are, where they feel like they're valued, where all of these pieces are there? And for some organizations, it's about working on the retention piece and the culture piece, even before the recruitment piece, if not that many people are coming in at the current time. So I think that might be one that works for Aurora, to say, for everyone who is here, are we where we want to be? And yes, okay, well, now then we're going to work on the recruitment strategies to bring in new people into a culture that already is ready to receive them, that already is one where we culturally are competent, where people are getting the training from, whether it be every 6 months or whenever it is, where people are speaking the same language, where respect exists in a universal way, where everyone's not just sitting at the table, but has a voice at the table, and has a voice at the table that all of us respect, regardless of people's gender or the color of their skin or their ethnicity or their accent or whatever their factor might be.
Thank you. This, hopefully, with respect to training, there's a lot of training here. So are you going to be guiding us? Is somebody going to be guiding us again, what we're picking first and how we progress? And also I'll ask you at the same time, what happens, and I'm sure you've experienced this, what happens if we have a staff or staff that don't want to have these goals? What do we do with them?
Doctor?
I love your questions. This is wonderful. I really am really appreciative of them. Thank you so much. So to answer your second question, perhaps first, on what do we do if certain people are not in line with our goals? And I think the really, really important thing is that we as an organization have to set our standards to define who we are. At the town of Aurora, if we say we are an anti-racist organization, then we are an anti-racist organization. So if someone comes into our organization, or someone already exists within our organization who is okay with racism, then we have to be very clear with saying, we appreciate and value you as a person, but this is not going to be acceptable. So I think as soon as you as a town, as an organization, define yourself to say, we stand for diversity and equity and inclusion. We welcome people of diverse backgrounds because that is who we are as Canadians. We are going to be supporting inclusion in its highest form, to say everyone has a voice at our table, regardless of who you are and what you are. That we make sure equity, and the concept of equity, really, I find the synonym that supports it best is fairness. Are we a fair organization? Is everyone within the organization feel like we are a fair organization? Sometimes we might think we're a fair organization, but when we speak to different people, they might have different opinions. So really to be able to say, are we genuinely a fair organization based on what the responses are from our people? So if we at Aurora say, These are what our values are. This is what our mission is. This is what our vision is. This is what our values are. This is who we are. And we welcome you into our family, but you have to align and respect our values. We cannot welcome you with open arms if you are wanting to come in and be racist. We cannot welcome you if you are going to be treating certain people with microaggressive behavior or prejudice. And I think the stronger you are in standing up for your values, you'll find that the culture evolves around that. You'll find that if you as the leadership team and all of you being very, very important who are on this call right now say that this is the tone we've set, then anyone else who comes into the organization will know what this organization represents and will know that they have to make sure they align with these things. And if they're going to be biased or if they're going to be prejudiced or discriminatory, then they're not going to do it on the grounds of the town of Aurora, because that's not what we do.
And this needs to be continued perhaps with legal as well. And the other question was the training. We can't do all of this training at once. So
yeah,
do you have a roadmap for us?
I think there's a number of ways in which we can do this training. I think one thing that I can suggest is that we break it down in terms of topics. So one thing that's very popular for organization is the introduction to diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism, so that a lot of organizations are now putting that training as a part of their onboarding to say every person that comes into the organization, just like they have to read their manuals and they have to do the health and safety and so forth, this becomes a part of what they do as they come into the organization. A lot of organizations have said, well, let us offer this training to our staff once every 6 months. That way, if anyone new is on the team, they can join. All of us that are already on the team, we can have a refresher to understand once again what things are happening. And a lot of the times, the examples that I'll bring in every 6 months will be different. They'll be what's happening right now, what is relevant right now, what we have to understand right now. So I feel like it doesn't have to be something that's in every month, every week on the agenda, because it's not possible, not financially or logistically either. But if we were able to set up timelines to say, is it once a year that we can offer this training? Is it twice a year, perhaps? Is it once every quarter? And in between that, if there are specific topics that the town of Aurora feels like is a need or something's come up and has to be addressed, then we can develop certain trainings around that as well. So I think the roadmap would really, and I'm happy to support that roadmap, of course, without question, but the roadmap would really be based on your time and your resources and what you think would be the willingness of people. Everyone that I spoke to was very excited to continue learning, but that can mean once every 6 months. It can mean once every year. And of course, we can have a second date for anyone who didn't make the first date to be able to have a backup option as well. So if we do that, yeah, and we make sure we do that every year, people are consistent with the language and the conversations every year.
Thank you. I'm not asking any more questions. This is going to take a long time, but as a town, as a councillor, I'm very glad that we've taken the first step. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Councillor Gallo.
Thank you, Dr. Jalal. An excellent action plan and report and presentation. I have a question, and it's a somewhat difficult question. You may or may not have the answer for it, and I'll apologize in advance that it is a difficult question, but it needs to be asked. In terms of equity and inclusion, the town of Aurora recently put in a policy to mandate that staff provide personal medical status regarding vaccination. And if you don't, you ultimately could be fired. So in terms of equity and inclusion, how do we, I guess, bridge that gap? And maybe it's come across your desk. Maybe it's obviously very recent, a hot topic. But reading the report and listening to you, I had difficulty, bridging that gap.
Doctor?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councillor Gallo, for that question, a very important one at that. So I wear several hats in life, and one of them is a public health professional hat. So my PhD is actually in public health. And I am at the hospital 5 days a week, and I have been on the front lines of this pandemic. So the DEI work is very important to me, as is my public health hat. So I really appreciate this question that you ask around vaccinations and so forth, and how do we do this in a way that is equitable and inclusive. So a number of concerns have come out around this across the field. And I'm a professor with Seneca College and New York University. One thing that Seneca College has done, I don't know if all of you have followed the news, first institution across the country in Canada where vaccinations have been mandated. So not one person can be on our campus unless they have a vaccination card or one that's been uploaded on our app. How we have dealt with this on an equity and inclusion perspective, because there's the aspect of public health, of course, and trying to keep people safe. And then there's the aspect of are we excluding people who perhaps have chosen not to get the vaccine and so forth. And so, Councillor Gallo, with the public health hat, I'm going to say that the importance of vaccinations is commonplace to all of us. However, the equity and inclusion piece comes in, the human rights piece, of course, comes in the fact that some people may not be able to take vaccines because of medical history, like you said. So if you have a policy where if someone is able to provide you a medical record that says that they are not, for medical reasons, able to take the vaccine for issues that they would have, then we may have to consider that. Then we may have to say that the vaccination policy is required from everyone at the town, with the exception of A, B, C, D. And that exception of A, B, C, D is where we incorporate our equity piece, if you will, where we incorporate the fairness piece, because we want to be fair to everyone. So we can't have a blanket approach of everyone is vaccinated or else they're not going to be working at the town if they have reasons that are valid for not having the vaccine. So for the two big grounds from a human rights perspective that have been allowed in terms of the vaccination, one has been the medical status of people. So if you have a medical condition that does not permit you to take the vaccine and you have a medical record to support that, then that is one that has been respected by institutions and all bodies that are now requiring a mandatory vaccination. And the second one has been on religious grounds. So if people are coming to you with the religious ground to say our religion does not permit vaccinations, and we've seen a smaller number of this, but it still existed, and it still continues to exist. So that is another ground in terms of the human rights side, where people can come to you and say, well, we work at the town and we'd like to continue working at the town. We have a religious restriction for which we are not able to take a vaccine. So the equity piece, Councillor Gallo, really comes into the piece of fairness. Are we being fair with our policies? And if we have a vaccination for all policy, then of course the exemption has to exist for people who are not able to take the vaccine. We cannot fire someone when they medically are not able to take the vaccine. We cannot fire someone when they are saying they belong to a religion or a faith that does not allow them to take the vaccine. Those are the two human rights ones. Outside of that, it's really up to you as an organization. Human rights wise, you wouldn't be mandated to make those, what can I say, to make other things permissible if you so did not choose to. If you said at the town, we would like everyone to be vaccinated for the safety of all, unless you belong to one of these groups where you are not able to take the vaccine, in which case equity pushes us and promotes us and encourages us to respect those boundaries that people have.
Councillor?
And I really appreciate that. And I'm glad I asked it, and that was a thorough answer. At some point, is it understood that through this action plan, we would look at our policies and through that lens and then adjust accordingly?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the pieces of work that I did get to do with you is to be able to look at a number of your documents, definitely not all of your documents. There was a number of them that were submitted to me. And with that, what we did was we looked at it with a DEI lens, if you will, where we looked at it to say, is the language competent? Does anything need to be changed? So we have done that with a number of your documents, obviously not all of them. And I know a number of you have mentioned that there are other ones that you wanted us to look at as well. So that practice is very, very important, whether you have someone external like myself do it, or you have someone internal on your team do it, if the qualifications are there, to make sure that every number of years, we do look at our policies and we do make sure that the language is fit for purpose, that it is equitable, and that we make sure that what we are asking of people is fair. And so the review that we did was one to look at language and so forth. We didn't do a deep dive on the equity piece, but again, that's also a very, very important one as well. A lot of organizations will give us documents to only do an equity piece, to say, don't worry about the language or anything else. We can figure that part out. Just tell us if our policies are fair, because it seems like they've been drafted a long time ago, and perhaps the time was different then when it was fair then, and it might not be considered fair now. So I encourage all of us to be on top of our policies, on top of our guidelines, on top of our documents, really everything that governs us and our people, to say, can we look at this with a DEI lens? And you don't always need someone external. I mean, I'm happy to come in whenever, but you don't always even need that. Sometimes you can even look at a document yourself. And as soon as you have more of the education and the training yourself, you can review something and say, okay, I'm going to highlight the things that I think aren't seeming like they're the most inclusive, or I can reword this in a different way to include more people, or there's a fairness component there in which some people might argue that this might not be the most fair way to handle things. And so we do this with policies across the board, whether it be maternal, paternal leave ones, whether it be HR code of conduct, whether it be, there's so many different things that we do need to look at. Anything that governs our people, we have to make sure is fair. Anything that governs our people, we have to make sure is inclusive.
Councillor?
Thank you. And just to Mr. Mayor, if you haven't already, I would highly, highly encourage you looking at that specific policy, because I'm not entirely sure it complies with the things that you said tonight. So I mean, this is why we're here, equity and inclusion. And if we don't get that right, we're just being hypocritical. So if you haven't already, I would love for you to take a look at that.
No, I don't. When was this policy created? Was it more recent, or?
No, within the last 6 weeks, a month.
Okay, definitely not. No, our review was done a long time before then. So I definitely haven't had exposure to this policy yet, but I really appreciate you bringing that up and asking the questions, because it's been a taboo topic for many people to say, here we live in a pandemic, and how do we navigate this, and how do we navigate this in a way that's respectful and inclusive to all, while still making sure that we're all safe.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Doctor, thank you. And I agree. I'd love for you to look at that policy, because we do provide for valid exemptions. So I think that, as you said, it's about providing the health and safety of all our employees while being fair, equitable, and inclusive. So love to get your feedback on that one as well. I think it's, we talked about culture, and we've heard it around the table about culture. And how do you change culture? And I love the fact that the number one on the list is commitment from the top. And I think it's so important that people need to understand culture does not change unless there is that commitment from the top. Ultimately, and I just want to say, I believe diversity and inclusion strategies are just not simply a task on a list to be completed and forgotten about. They should be and will be an integral part of our community, woven into the fabric of our community as we go forward towards a positive, more inclusive future. And I think that's important for everyone in the town of Aurora to understand that the commitment level is here from our leadership team. And I've enjoyed our conversations that we've had, and I'm excited about us moving forward in the direction that we are. And I want to thank as well Deputy Mayor Kim for bringing this forward when he did, and for us to move forward in this direction. So thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Council. Without any other comments or questions, I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Doctor, thank you very much for coming out this evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you, and I'm always here to support in whatever capacity I can. Thank you so much.
Council will move to item 8.2, Mitchell Avenue and Earn Avenue traffic control assessment. The recommendation is 1, that report number PDS 21093 be received. 2, that staff continue to monitor the traffic operations at the intersection of Mitchell Avenue and Irwin Avenue. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Kim, second. Councillor Gilliland, any comments or questions on this one? Councillor Kim?
I realize that the staff recommendation is recommending that we do not apply the crosswalk or the all-way stop sign, but we have to keep in mind that even though that the traffic warrants criteria were not met, we're still in a COVID situation where some of the traffic is still muted, and we don't have to look very far. I think it's just last week's public planning meeting that we do have intensification going on within a one town block, and with that, there's going to be more traffic and more congestion, and more volume. So I see no reason why we can go against the staff recommendation and be proactive in this case. And right now, this three-way intersection is not it's not unlike other intersections. It's not a large thoroughfare, but it's quickly becoming one. I think the all-way stop sign, the crosswalk, it delivers with respect to traffic management. It helps the livability of the residents on the street. It helps with the parking with regards to those who are from out of the neighborhood or parking not in the best location to have a shorter commute to the tennis courts. So for all those reasons, I think this is, a good time to have the stop sign in place. I don't think it inconveniences anybody other than the infrequent people who drive through this area, and inconveniences those who live in the neighborhood. So for those reasons, I would like to have the crosswalk in place and the all-way stop sign in place. Thank you.
Is that an amendment?
Yes, I'd like to amend it to. Let's just go back to the court.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes. So
Mr. Mayor, could you ask the clerk if this qualifies as an amendment?
I did. And I also believe that it's not contrary, because all the recommendation asks is that staff continue to monitor the traffic operations at the intersection at Machel Avenue and Irwin Avenue, which they can continue to do even if Councillor Kim puts forward his amendment.
Okay.
If it said that staff do not recommend a full or implementing a all-way stop at this intersection at this time, and will continue to monitor it, then that would be contrary. But because it doesn't speak to that, I don't believe it's contrary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree.
If I may, I'll amend by adding putting forward the alternative recommendation, which is 1 and 2.
Which is what?
So at the end of the report gives you alternatives to the recommendation.
Before I make my ruling, let me see what you're putting forward. What page is it on, Councillor?
It's 7 of 8.
So you want to put both 1 and 2? Or just 1?
You can only do 1.
Yeah, you only need 1. I don't know why you would want 1 and 2. Yes, 2 doesn't have a stop sign.
That's why I want 1 and 2.
No, but if you have a stop sign, people are crossing. You have, in essence, you have it. 1 includes both.
I thought,
Actually, it does. Council approved the installation of an all-way stop control and a crosswalk. So 1 has both. So you'd like 1 on there as an added clause.
must not be reading properly, but 1 it is.
Okay. Someone like to second that? Councillor Humphreys. To the amendment. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know this is a big problem for the residents, and I do agree that we need to put a stop sign there. I think it's not the only solution. I think we should try and limit, the traffic cutting through is also an issue. I'd like to find a way to try and limit that or completely stop that. I'm not sure about the crosswalk though. I would like to put the stop sign in place and then see if we need a crosswalk there. With the crosswalk would be on the north part of the street. I'm sorry, the south side, because the north just goes to the greenhouse, if I'm correct on that.
I am not sure where it goes because I don't see it on the figure.
In any case, I would like to try the stop sign first. I don't think we need a crosswalk there.
Okay, Councillor Hayes, I'm just going to ask, is Mr. Bat with us or is Anka with us, or who can I get to speak? Mr. Waters, can you speak to just explain where exactly the crosswalk would be?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as per the alternative recommendation, the crosswalk would be on the south side of Mitchell.
That makes sense.
Okay, Councillor, I hope that answers the question for you.
That I mean, that's the appropriate place, but I don't see a crosswalk being needed there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson. To the amendment.
Thank you. To the amendment. So if I may, just with regards to the report, one of the things that stood out to me was the constant referral to, at this time under the existing conditions. And so, when I think of the amendment and where this is going, I also am cognizant of the fact that council has before it a significant planning application for that corner that would significantly impact the warrants and the data that's in this report. Mm-hmm. So through you to Mr. Waters, Mr. Waters, the way I read the report, it really was a snapshot in time as of today. Can you confirm whether or not consideration was given to the volumes that would be on those streets as a result of the planning application that is before us, and whether or not that was taken into consideration in the drafting of this report and the recommendations?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the traffic data that was recorded in September does not include the proposed application because it's just proposed. It's actual volumes of pedestrians and cars that were recorded at that time. So it does not include that application.
Councillor?
Thank you. And, I like the opportunity to be proactive than reactive. We're hearing from the residents today that there is an issue. And yes, I realize in the report that it doesn't necessarily meet the warrants, but I don't want to get to a situation where we're dealing this well after the fact. And all of a sudden, not only is the situation compounded, but now it does meet the warrants and we haven't done anything. So, I guess when I look at the report and I think about that planning application, while ultimately, it may still change in certain aspects of it, given the Caitlin/Central building across the street and so that's it, I think there will be something on that corner. How many units, the density, all those kind of components, I think that's still to be determined. But definitely, whatever the data is in this report, it's going to increase and get either closer or exceed those warrants. And so, that's why I think that I'm comfortable moving ahead with the amendment and supporting it, because I think, I get that today doesn't meet the warrants, but I think it will.
Thank you. Councillor Gillen, to the amendment.
Thank you. I mean, I did look at the report and I read all the criteria, and it was an outstanding no. We do have these rules in place to help guide us making these decisions where we're going to put stop signs and crosswalks. And I was trying to find anything that would kind of give us any kind of leverage to say it would merit this other than that planning application. However, that planning application is not finalized. For all I know, they could pull it and they don't build anything. I really don't know what it's going to look like when it is built in the traffic. And maybe the stop sign is not what's going to actually solve the problem. Maybe it'll be calming measures like speed humps instead. Specifically, how I felt the issue was people who were driving and going through and assuming that it was a throughway street, but in fact, it was a dead end street. So I'm not really quite sure how the stop sign is going to deter people from trying to get to a dead end street and turn around because there's a stop sign to say, look, there's a sign there that says no exit. I'm just not, I think what staff's recommending by monitoring, I think is a good idea because there are some changes coming ahead and maybe what we're presenting is not going to solve the issue the way that we'd like just by putting something Band-Aid on it again. One of the top things here is, not to use always stop as a means of deterring movement of traffic through a residential area. The other as a speed control device. There's two major things right there that says these are reasons you should not be putting a stop sign in. As well as the crosswalk, that also didn't merit as well based on the outlines of the book from that's provided by the Traffic Act. So I'd like to respect what that says. I understand that we want to be proactive, but again, we don't know what that finalized planning application is going to be like. It was quite clear to the developers that, the traffic analyst of the area was incomplete and needed to have some refinement. Even spoke about some possible traffic lights. We weren't really quite sure where the parking was going to be. We weren't quite sure where the direction of traffic was going to end up. So I do think it's very preliminary to be installing the stop sign at this point because it just might not be the right solution.
Thank you. Councillor Gallo, to the amendment.
Thank you. To, I guess, Mr. Waters. Have we ever done a study, or are there any studies out there of the carbon footprint attached to adding stop signs, having vehicles that would normally go right by, and now we're introducing a stop sign where they're idling and stacking up and everything that comes with it.
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, I'm not aware of any that have been prepared by the town, but anecdotally, I know that once you stop a car and start it again, you do waste more energy.
Councillor?
I just think at some point we should do some type of a study to understand that, because I think it's significant when we keep introducing these things where the merits aren't there, even though we may feel it's justified. I don't think it's a complete picture, especially if we're, as a town, we keep promoting that we're being conscious of our carbon footprint, and we're doing so much to try to deal with environmental issues. To me, this is a big one. We put one in on John Westway, and I can tell you minimum 8 to 10 cars every morning are backed up, stopped and idling to get down John Westway, and the merits weren't there for that one either. So I won't be supporting this. I'm happy to monitor it, and if it comes a point where it's justified, then obviously we move forward with it.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner, second time to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Has everybody spoken for first time?
No, but go ahead. No one else has their hand up.
Okay, thank you. Really, this is a tricky one. I think the only thing that would stop this is if we could prevent non-neighborhood traffic from using these two streets. If we had a red light camera, maybe we could do that. To Mr. Waters, do you have any idea how effective no turn signs are?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have used them in that general neighborhood, as you know. And if you contravene the traffic sign, then, it's an enforcement issue. I don't have any statistics to share with you on that.
Counselor?
Thank you. I don't know how we would enforce that. So I think that we have to err on the side of caution and do stop there. I'm hoping that not that many people are going to be using it. Certainly not as many as on John West Way. I didn't realize before, but there is that would directly align with the path into the park. And I don't know how many people use that pathway to the park, but it would be the ideal location for a stop sign for pedestrian traffic as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have to say, it's really tough because I 100% agree with Councillor Gallo. It's contrary to our efforts to, to protect against climate change. But I think the residents feel unsafe here, and I don't want that to be happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions to the amendment? Go ahead, Councillor, quickly. Yes.
Is there a way to separate the?
I was going to ask Councillor Kim if he was, because there was some. Councillor Kim, are you okay if we separate and vote separately on the crosswalk and stop? That's fine. So we'll have two separate amendments, one for a crosswalk, one for the stop sign.
Thank you.
That's fine with you. So I'll just who seconded it again? Amendment, Councillor Humphries, you okay with that? Okay, so we'll make that a friendly amendment to it, and we'll adjust it and separate it. So we're gonna vote first on the stop sign. Okay. As the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. And now the crosswalk. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. I was waiting for you to put your hand up, Councillor.
I was surprised by Councillor Gallo's vote on that. Thank you.
Thank you. So back to the main motion as amended. Anyone would like to speak to it? Otherwise, it's just going to call a vote. I'll just say that, in case because the camera I know is far away, I'm also in favor. So I think we need to be proactive as well. I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, 8.3. 2021 interim forecast update as of August 31st, 2021. Recommendations report number FIN 21042 be received for information. Would like to move that. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Humphries, any comments or questions on this one? Councillor Gardner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Am I still here? I am. Under planning and development services, going back, it's a tax levy surplus of, more than $1 million. So I'm wondering with the COVID attempts that the town, or the COVID protections that the town has put in place, I'm wondering how much of an impact does that have on our surplus? I'm just curious. If it can't be answered now, that's fine.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the COVID impact on the town, we've actually identified that further in the report under table 3. It appears on page 8 of 13 of the main report, and it identifies the areas where we're seeing lost revenues or additional costs related to COVID. Most of these are in Ms. McDougall's area, and there are some impacts in Mr. Downey's area. What's happening in planning and development is, I think Mr. Waters could probably speak to this a little bit more, but there was a delay in some of the planning work that happened last year, and now we're seeing the impact of that.
Thank you. I was kind of looking for a percentage, if that was possible. And with the money we received from the province, because we have such, for COVID measures, because of or loss of money due to COVID, because we have such a large surplus or a predicted large surplus, is that going to have any effect on us using that money or how we can use that money?
Ms. Moira Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the reporting that we have to provide back to the province on how we're using the funding is about specific to those losses that we're experiencing or those additional costs. So we're still able to use those funds, and we are reserving some of those funds to be able to use towards some pressures that will continue into 2022.
Councillor.
Okay, and it's here, somewhere here it says, okay, I'll wait till I find that. With respect to the town square, there's two cases where the money that we're not spending because of various strategies that we're doing, that money is going back into the R&R fund, which is for repair and replacement. I don't agree with that. I don't understand that. Why wouldn't it be going back into the new reserve?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the funds relating to Aurora Town Square that you're speaking of are the funds that are there for the repayment of the debt. So we're not needing all those funds at this point in time. So when the budget for 2020 came forward, when we had those 0.5% increases, the recommendation in that budget at the time was any of those excess funds until they're required go towards facilities asset management, which is the repair and replacement reserves.
Councillor.
Isn't there also, it's not, well, maybe this follows then from what you said, but unspent savings, it says town square unspent savings. Wouldn't that wouldn't be, or would it be on debt interest?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
So there are two pieces to this. There's the piece that relates to the repayment of the debt for when we issued the debt. And then there's also the piece for the town square operating costs. So some of those costs are taking place right now, but some of those costs, because they're operating, they will fall as part of the regular surplus, and they'll end up being contributed to reserves based on the surplus management policy that was approved by council.
Councillor.
I understand what you're saying, but I still don't think that they should go back into a repair and replacement reserve. Like, that's contrary to even the name of the reserve. This is a new construction. I think it's inappropriate. I feel very strongly about that. So would you like to respond, or shall we just leave it at that for now?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the reasoning for the recommendation of putting those additional funds towards facilities, asset management in particular, was because this is a major facility investment for the town. So part of the asset management costs over time will need to use additional funds that will be going into that specific reserve, which is why the recommendation was to put it to that reserve so that they can be used in the future for maintaining the facility over time.
Councillor.
So again, it's just, it's inappropriate, and it's just contrary to what the intent of that reserve fund is. It's absolutely inappropriate. I don't know if other councillors feel that way, but certainly know how I feel. There was planning and development services, Mr. Waters, or maybe Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel. There was savings in the road network. How could we have savings in the road network? Was that because people weren't traveling as much during COVID?
Mr. Waters?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe it's projects that came in under the capital budget approval. There was some savings in those.
They came in under
That's
cost?
correct. That's correct, yes.
Thank you. With respect to in the operations department, there was savings, waste collection and contracts. Could someone explain how that happened?
Mr. Downey?
Evening, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. The savings in waste collection has to do directly with the 3-bag limit. As you know, council imposed a 3-bag limit, and since we are collecting less garbage, we are now paying less to GFL.
Councillor?
So through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Downey, so people are really obeying this 3-bag limit?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's been extremely successful, and we have identified savings. We've been reporting that to council. In fact, we are projecting savings for this year that will be then projected into next year's budget as well. And as you know, we are now beginning a bag tag system for 2022.
Councillor?
I'm glad to hear that. That's been in since January, has it?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. It was instituted January 1st of this year.
That was a nod. Thank you, Mr. Downey. I'm finished for the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland?
Thank you. I had highlighted exact same thing that Councillor Gartner was speaking of in regards to the town square reserves. So I suppose I'll have an offline conversation with finance to better understand the decisions for the facility and repair and what possible opportunities we could allocate that elsewhere, or other solutions, or if that is ultimately the best allocation. So I do share that same concern, Councillor Gartner. So thanks for bringing that up. Just a follow up on the question on the recovery funding from the province, and it does say in the report that it will be allocated to various applicable projects. And I was wondering, when is council going to be receiving a report on where that's going to be allocated?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So part of the 2022 budget has where we're planning to allocate those funds for 2022. So council will see that in the budget documents that they'll receive next week.
Councillor?
Perfect. Thank you. I had a couple questions on the projection. Sorry, let me just go to the page here. Highlighted. The Aurora Economic Development Corporation marketing campaign. I just don't remember if we received a report, or if we receive a report on what those funds are allocated for within that committee. Is that something that council sees?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just looking for the reference in the report.
Councillor, which page?
73.
70.
Or 4 of 10 of the one of the attachments.
73 or 4 of 10. Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Okay.
On the budgeted capital spending forecast date.
Yes, I see that now. I actually we ask. This is part of the marketing campaign for the Aurora Economic Development. I'd have to get you further information on that.
Okay, I would like to see that. Perfect, thank you. Question on town square was answered. And then under finance, you have a community benefit charge study. And I was wondering if you could just kind of explain to me what you meant by project delays due to information flow. Most of the explanations were a little bit more detailed about COVID or something or to that effect, but I just didn't quite understand what that meant.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we are working with our consultant on the community benefit charge study, but they are still trying to fully understand the regulations because community benefit charge is very new and it needs to be set up by September 19th, 2022. So we are still working with them on that. And it's a matter of getting some additional information and making sure that they have the adequate time to fully digest and understand the regulations.
Councillor?
Thank you. And do we have a timeline or projected kind of outlook that we're waiting on? Because I recall we were having this conversation before about, this being new and having to understand that. So is there some sort of timeline or hard stop when we have to kind of have our ducks in a row to have this completed?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So on September 19th, 2022, if we do not have a community benefit charge, then there are services under the DC that we will no longer be able to charge for. So that is the end date for when we need to make sure we have one in place. We'll be looking at trying to get this completed in the first half of 2022.
Councillor?
Great. Thanks. That's all.
Councillor Gallo?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel, just on corporate revenue and expenses. The other questions have been answered. I just have some questions. It says that corporate revenue and expenses is forecasting a deficit of $416,100 on a net operating budget of $3.5 million. The primary driver of this deficit relates to town-wide salary and benefit adjustments, including the $127,000 salary gapping savings related to the positions during the first 6 months of the year. I guess two questions. First, could you explain in more depth why we have a $416,000 deficit primarily related to salary and benefits? And if we didn't have the gapping of 127,000, would that deficit, would we add that 127,000 to that deficit? And I realize that the 416 also has to do with lower than anticipated supplementary taxes, but the major part of that is salary and benefit adjustments.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
For you, Mr. Mayor, so the way the budget was developed last year, we had the 127,000, which related to the new positions that were approved by council. The savings and the gapping for the first 6 months of those positions was included in the corporate revenues and expenditures budget. But when the actuals come through, the actuals are actually realized in the departmental budgets. So there's an offset for that deficit with savings in the various departments. There was also some assumptions that we had at the top level for salaries and benefits, for benefit rates, for salary rates, because we had not completed our collective bargaining agreement. We also had some other further assumptions for for benefits that weren't rolled out at that point in time, so they were held corporately. And the savings relating to this deficit would be seen throughout the departmental budgets with savings on their salaries and benefit lines.
Councillor?
Mr. Mayor, just so I understand, would we be adding the $127,000 because we didn't spend it, because it was a gapping, we didn't hire people, to the deficit? Had we hired them, we would have had to pay them, which would have increased the deficit. Is that right?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So right now, overall, for the budget for the town, we have a surplus on the tax levy. So in this particular area, we have that deficit relating to that 127,000, but we have an equal offset in the departmental budget. So when we look at salaries and benefits as a whole for the entire corporation, these will offset against each other.
Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, but this is corporate revenue and expenses. This is everyone, right? This is just that department. So just that department had a deficit of $416,000 primarily related to salary and benefits.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So corporate revenues and expenditures is a number of corporate accounts. So these are for items that don't necessarily fit within all the individual departments. So this stands alone and separate from the departments, but rolls into the corporation's total. So what this does is it gives us the flexibility to make some assumptions, especially when we don't have finalized contracts for collective bargaining. We didn't have some other finalized information for benefits to do those adjustments at a top level without rolling them out through the entire budget. It also is a place where we have things where our grant revenues come in and get allocated to reserve, our supplementary taxes. We have penalties and taxes included in this area. So it's basically where everything that doesn't necessarily fit within a specific department, it lands in this corporate group of accounts.
Counselor?
I guess my question is, from the report, the majority of that deficit is related to salary and benefit adjustments. Is there more detail that you have that you could send me prior to council?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Or send all of us if anyone's interested.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, we can provide a summary of salaries and benefits overall for the corporation, and then you'll see the savings in the various departments and then the offset in this area.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, would that report identify that 316,000 as well as the 127,000?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so that would identify everything relating to salaries and benefits. So we'll break it down by department, including corporate revenues and expenditures, and give a total for the corporation. So everything will be in there.
Councillor?
Would I be able to see that number, the 416,100, in that report?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
What that number, how that number was derived?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can put a separate information together on that 416,000 because there's a number of other things that are happening in corporate accounts, some puts and calls in there that would need to be identified.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Gardner, second time.
Thank you.
I can't hear, Mr. Mayor. I'm not good.
You're on mute. Councillor Gardner, you're on mute. I don't even think she can hear me. Councillor. Mr. Clerk.
Councillor Gardner, can you hear me?
No, we can hear you, Councillor Gallo. So I'm assuming it's something to do with her computer. Councillor Gardner, can you hear me now? Councillor Gardner? Did you text her? Yeah. Can you hear me, Councillor Gardner? I can read lips. We can't hear you. Can someone text her? Councillor Humphreys, can you text her and just let her know to log out and log back in? Something might have happened on her end. Okay, so you know what, Council? We are 10 minutes to our health break. Why don't we just take our health break and we'll be back at 9 o'clock. Is that good? Does that work for everyone? And then we'll get Councillor Gardner back up and running, and we'll just also can we read? What's that? Oh, that clock's. Oh, I looked at the wrong clock. Sorry, guys. So be back here at 8:50. Let's go 8:55, okay? And we'll get Councillor Gardner back up and running, okay? So we're just going to recess.
Are you still there? No, I mean, I wonder if you could.
Counselor, can you hear me? Can you hear
I
me?
can.
Okay, so
Sandra.
we recessed, so we'll be back
Thank you.
at 8:55. Okay,
Thanks, Sandra.
at least now I can hear you, so that's good.
No idea. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Appreciate
Council, can I get everyone back, please? Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Gardner, as soon as we get, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, we do have quorum, do we not? Councilor Gardner, go ahead with your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for calling the recess so I could figure this out. I was asking under corporate revenues and expenses, the supplementary taxes, they're going to be lower than anticipated because of the slower development rate. And this places downward pressure on the town's short-term asset assessment growth. So does that but that means we'll have a smaller tax base than we anticipated for 2022?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, we are looking at a smaller tax base than anticipated. So we talked about this at FAC last week, and in our 2022 budget, we had forecasted 2.2% growth, and we are looking at that being at least 1% less. So that is creating pressure.
Councilor?
Thank you. That's okay. It's not good, but thanks for the explanation. With respect to the 877,100 in COVID-19 recovery relief, it says, the report says it's going to be allocated for various projects and pressures. Now, I know it's going to be, our losses at the rec centers, et cetera, parks, programs, but could you just elaborate on what projects and especially the projects, but on the pressures?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the funding that was received this year for the municipal recovery funding. We are contributing all that to reserve in this year, and we actually have a planned use for it in the 2022 budget, and the details will be included in the budget they receive next week. Most of it is to offset pressures in community services for lost revenues.
Councillor?
Thank you. I was just wondering about the projects part because I don't think we'd have any projects for 2021. I just want to know what you meant by projects, or perhaps Ms. McDougall meant by projects.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, earlier this year, we came with a report that did actually allocate some COVID funding towards projects. So if you remember, there was the work that we did at Matchell's Alley to make that an outdoor seating space. And there were some projects like that were included. Right now in the budget for next year, we're looking more at operating pressures being offset.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 8.4, Emerald Ash Borer Management Plan Update. Recommendation 1, that report number OPS 21-017 be received. 2, that the Emerald Ash Borer Management Plan continue in future years, including treatment of municipal trees on biannual basis with triazine, forestry, health maintenance, replanting initiatives, and removals as required. And 3, that this program's annual service costs be included in the town's future operating budget commencing in 2023 for council's consideration. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Gilliland, Councillor Kim, any comments or questions on this item? Councillor Gardner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we have to do it. It's been a long haul and it's a lot of money. but I do notice, Mr. Downey, I think I spoke to your department. It wasn't you in particular, but on Devlin, on one of our boulevard trees, it has had all of the treatments and it is dying. So do you know what our success is?
Mr. Downey?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, our success is a little over, well, somewhere between 65 and 70%. If you take a look at the numbers of trees within the report, we have we had approximately 2,000 trees, or 3,000 trees, I apologize. And we lost about 1,000, but 250 of that 1,000 were attributed to the ice storm. So whether those trees would have died or not, I'm not quite sure. So I'd say we're somewhere between 66 and 70%.
Thank you. And thank you very much. Follow up, Mr. Mayor. Is that generally what other municipalities are finding?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it varies. As you know, we were one of the few municipalities that went forward with the treatment program, and so they suffered a greater loss of trees than we did. I think the picture within the report perhaps shows it best that there is some success, and 2 trees right beside each other, and both ash trees, one being treated and one being untreated, and so, you know, we knew that we were going to have some loss, but I think that being able to maintain that tree cover and that cover on the street, I think was well worth it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yes, I saw that picture. It's you know, it's unfortunately a good salesman for why we need to keep doing this. I meant with respect to other municipalities who started early and, you know, have been doing it as long as we have. But I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because we need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Downey. You know, Mr. Downey, as Councillor Gardner alluded to, you know, this issue has been before us in a long time. Certainly was brought to me while I was on council in that first term in 2011 or 2012. You know, I know it's always hard to go back and look at things over the long haul, but, you know, way back then at the beginning, you know, we looked at so many options. And as you said, you know, we were one of the few municipalities to move forward with the option of treating it as opposed to not doing anything. And, you know, in the report to date, you've talked about the costs that we've spent to save all those trees. But I just wondered how difficult it would be to go back and look at, you know, those reports early on. And we talked about the costs associated with it and just give a little bit more comparisons of what we thought when we first made this decision versus where we are today. And secondly, you know, the benefit of that decision versus had we not done it, you know, what would have been the costs and so forth. So, you know, I don't know how much more difficult that is to provide those additional details in terms of that cost benefit analysis. But, you know, I think that it's great. The picture you provided, I think, you know, that's worth 1,000 words by itself in terms of how successful the program's been. But I'm just curious as it relates back to those early reports when we were struggling to really forecast the cost and the impact and so forth, just to sort of validate those decisions along the way. It would be great if that's possible, but at the same time, I'm just not sure how challenging that would be. Do you have a comment?
Mr. Downey?
So through Mr. Mayor, and thank you for this opportunity. So we spent about $1.5 million within the report. You notice that over the 10 years. And if we saved 750 or 1,000 trees, we're probably talking about $150 a tree. And that's the right math, isn't it? I think it's the right math. Anyway, the value of the trees is one thing. The impact of those trees is a completely different thing. And I'll take you back to that picture. Can you imagine how different the street would look if that tree wasn't there? So regardless of whether its value or not, it's what impact it has on the actual street. And so I think taking any measure in order to try to save that canopy, I think was well worth it. And I would encourage you to do it again. However, will be a debate again when we bring it forward in 2023. And council will have an opportunity to then take a look and say, you know, we've looked back at our last 10 years. Is this something we want to continue on a biannual basis from then on? And then you can start judging what you feel the value of your streetscape is from not only a monetary, but from a visual perspective. That was our main goal. The other thing that we did in order to help cut some costs, as you know, we started a tree farm very early in the process. And so we weren't going off and buying additional nursery plants in order to replace these trees. We actually grew these trees ourselves and saved some money in those replacements. So part of the factoring in on the cost is we would have had to replace more trees and sooner if we had not treated them, and we would have more than likely had to buy additional nursery stock in order to do that. And that was not a cost that the citizens of Aurora had to incur.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. And certainly, you know, I echo the fact that, you know, the decision was the right one made back then and over the times, certainly, you know, kudos go out to yourself and all members of the team that have continually to look after this issue, update council, and had these conversations around it in terms of their efforts to try and save those trees. And I would agree with you. I mean, the cost is one thing, but the visual impact, environmental impact, and all of these indirect impacts as well, all factored into that decision at the time as well as today. But, you know, just as a guy who likes numbers, I just was a little bit curious with regards to looking back and going forward as one aspect of the value of the program. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo.
Thank you. I guess to Mr. Down, I'm just trying to understand the recommendations. The first one is to receive, which is fine. The second, that the Emerald Ash Borer management plan continue in future years, including treatment of municipal trees on a biannual basis with tree as in forest health maintenance, replanting initiatives, and removal as required. We're agreeing to continue the program in future years. And all this is mindful of, we're approaching a 2022 budget and our last budget, and then there will be a new council. Are we asking for the next council to continue this, as well as to put this in the, I guess it's already in the 2022 budget, and we debate that, and also to put it into the 2023 council budget for consideration? I'm just trying to, in the landscape of next year's an election year and new council, I'm trying to figure out what I'm committing to here.
Mr. Downey?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so this report does a few things. First of all, it gives you some numbers as to what the program did over the last 10 years. This is the final of the 10 years. This 2021 is the final year, and we have sufficient funds in this year's budget to finish the program. We are not going to be continuing the program in 2022. No trees are going to be treated in 2022, and there is no money allocated in the 2022 budget to do so. We would then recommence, or we're recommending recommence.
Is it just me or the program?
No, I think Mr. Downey froze. Is he back? No. Councillor, is that the only question you had for Mr. Downey?
That was, and just to share the same as Councillor Thompson, I'd like to see a history and just to see how we did. But I'd like to get a better understanding of what I'm agreeing to here.
Okay, so maybe we can get that. Unfortunately, technology is what it is, but maybe you can follow up with
Sure.
Mr. Downey, and we'll get those answers for you. And hopefully maybe by next week, right? So we can pull this item again if we'd like.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Humphries, did you want to speak or you're okay? Okay. Any other comments or questions? Call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. 8.5 tree removal permit application, 55 Metcalf Street. Recommendation is 1, that report number OPS 21-018 be received. And 2, that the tree removal permit application for 55 Metcalf Street be approved. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Gilliland, seconder. No seconder. Going once. Oh, Councillor Gardner, thank you. Comments, questions, Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Reading the report, it's a tree that, you know, if it wasn't designated or listed as a property of interest, the property owner would be able to remove. Is that not correct, Mr. Downey?
Mr. Downey, did you get back in time to hear that?
Sorry, I didn't. I had the same gremlins that Councillor Gardner had. So I'm sorry, what was the question?
So just reading the report, if this house or this property did not have a special interest listed of heritage designation, they could remove this tree based on our current tree removal policy. Is that correct?
I'm sorry. I apologize, Mr. Mayor. We moved on to the final report?
Yeah, we moved on. If there are any questions, Councillor Gallo and Councillor Humphries will reach out to you and get those questions answered.
Okay. So thank you. With regards to the final report with the tree removal, the tree is before council as a condition of the tree bylaw. Any tree that is within the Heritage District must come to council. Well, first of all, come to the Heritage Committee and then to council for a removal.
Councillor?
Thank you. And I believe if it wasn't part of the listed heritage on any other property within town, if it was under 70 dBH or measured at breast height, that it would be something that a homeowner could do. Is that not correct?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. That in accordance with the tree bylaw.
Councillor?
Thank you. I just wanted to make that clear. So, I mean, we've gone down this road before. I know Councillor Gardner and I have had discussions about this and with members of the Environmental Advisory Committee as well. So a couple things here is, you know, when we're talking about trees and the environment, I don't know why that the Environmental Committee would not be part of this assessment on our trees and environment. It doesn't really make any sense why we wouldn't be included in that evaluation. 2, I do think that it is flawed that any heritage tree on a landscaped area is under that designation. Considering we've been brought to council, other trees that are rather young that are considered heritage that may only be a year old. And I believe the point of a lot of this is, you know, trees that, I don't know, there is no matrix for it, but I would think that, you know, are larger, give character, the canopy, and we don't have that definition or designation as to what that's defined. And I believe we need to do some work on that, because the tree that we're looking at today, I mean, it's quite obvious. It's under the 70 dBH. You could tell that it was pruned improperly. I don't think I've ever seen a linden like that pruned. That's not its typical shape, and clearly has some problems with the splitting. So the fact that it's coming here, it just seems like an inefficient waste of time with staff and resources based on something that I think we have within our resources to define this without lumping this in with that heritage aspect. So I think that there's some work to do to kind of clean up that part. But I am in favor of removing the tree just based on the information I do have in front of us. And if we do make some changes, I would really like to see something like this come across the desk of the Environment Advisory Committee for this kind of assessment. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Council, notice of motion we'll deal with next week. New business. I will start to my right. Councilor Kemp. New business. Councilor Humphries. Councilor Gilliland.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Nadarozny. I'm just curious with the reopening plan. Obviously, there's been some restrictions that have been listed in the province and other establishments. We've had some restrictions lifted with the density of people you can have at events and other functioning facilities. And I'm just wondering why we cannot consider having the public come into the council meeting room for observation. And
Sale.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Currently, we are operating with the town hall closed except for access to our Access Aurora counter. We are doing this while we get used to the other facilities where we are providing an actual service out of the building, such as our rec centers and so on, allowing us some time to get up to speed with those new processes and screening tools and things, staffing. We also, in those situations, rely heavily on the user groups to help us with the screening because there's a lot of people that are going through. So we've concentrated our efforts right now on adapting to bringing those services back. And right now we're considering something for town hall, probably for January 1, in terms of opening it on a limited basis and possibly allowing for meetings and things like that to occur. So right now we're not, for example, hosting meetings in this building. It would require a different cleaning protocol. We'd have to space the meetings out. So we're just kind of like the rest of the municipalities in York Region, we're sort of maintaining the status quo from a town hall perspective. In order to eliminate any unnecessary contact between staff and the public. It also helps minimize, as I said earlier, our cleaning costs, extra costs that we might have for screening with people coming in, that sort of thing. So we are aiming for January to change that, as long as the COVID numbers continue to decrease like they have been.
Councillor.
Thank you. Well, personally, I'd like to see some sort of flexibility of trying to open this up sooner. It's nighttime. There's not very many people here. We've done it in the height of the pandemic. We were able to register people with a certain amount of time. A certain number of people spaced out. Surely we could have some designated seating areas. Normally we don't have a full house in here. Yeah. I feel like there's probably a way that we could do it earlier, especially now that, we do have a double vaccination policy, just like you're going to go see a Jays game or a Leaf game. Surely we could have some sort of system in place where if they were registered and confirming a double vaccination, the public could attend. Is there a way that we could perhaps look at this sooner?
Sarah?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can bring that back to our Pandemic Recovery Working Group, PRWG, and see if there's a way that we could possibly accelerate that. It's not our primary, our best option. For example, we don't even have all staff in this room yet. And in order to accommodate the ELT back in this room, we'd have to put up shields and things because we can't get the minimum distance that's still required by the regulation for some of those things. There's differences in the regulations. I know it seems kind of crazy. We can stack everybody into the Scotia Center, and yet there's still significant restrictions on other areas in terms of how we can operate. So, but I'll bring it back to the Pandemic Recovery Working Group and see if there's another way we can approach it.
Councillor.
Thank you. I appreciate it if you could get back to me and let us know. I know the public has been asking, and there is a small group that does like to frequent council and be in person. So the quicker we can get back, the better. The second question I had was a follow-up to some concerns through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Waters, and I apologize I didn't forewarn you in advance, but it just kind of dawned on me that we didn't really get an update on the basement issue with the planning meeting that we had last week, and the silt and water that was encroaching into their basement. And I thought we were going to get some sort of update, and I was hoping maybe perhaps you could maybe fill us in a little bit.
I'll direct that to Mr. CAO, as he was going to send all of you an email. Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just on the verge of sending an update to council, which I will get out tomorrow. Staff did attend the day after the meeting, and I've been there since then again. We've confirmed that the pipe that was one of the possible sources of water had been sealed as part of the demolition. So that is not the source of the water. The water would appear to be coming through the foundation. The resident also has another expert assessing the situation that he asked for in terms of his foundation. But we have to do some coordinated work with the region and figure out what the best solution is for that site, and then also assess to what degree some of the issues could be with the foundation itself, even though there is obviously a groundwater situation there that we're looking into. So there's a number of people from our staff that are involved in this, and we are looking into it, and we have committed to getting back to the resident with some concrete, actions or solutions, or at least analysis at the very least in terms of what we're finding. So, but it does involve the region, so we've also advised it will take some time.
Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner, new business.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a comment. There's a community meeting tomorrow evening on the official plan. And there also happens to be an anti-Black racism, anti-racism committee meeting. So therefore, those people will not be able to attend. And I know we have a lot of things on the go, but is there a way, or can we find a way so that we don't, plan two important things on one evening? That's a comment you don't have to answer. And I think we're going to try and set up another opportunity for people on that committee to give their input into the OP. And of course, considering the discussion we had this evening, that's very important.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Yallo, new business? Nope. Thank you. Councillor Thompson, new business?
As indicated earlier when we had the delegate, I wanted to put a motion on the floor that essentially that the delegate's request for an encroachment agreement be referred to staff, and that a report come back to us. I think our clerk, Mr. Duran's, prepared a motion, and there it is. So with council's indulgence, I'd like to put this forward so that staff can come back and provide the particulars and the details and go from there.
Someone like to second that? Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Thompson, did you want to speak to it, or just?
I think that personally, I spoke to it earlier, but I just think it's just important to have staff weigh in and provide the history, the details, so that council is well informed, and we'll have a conversation whenever it comes back.
Thank you. Anyone else? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Anything else, Councillor Thompson?
Nope, that was it.
Thank you. Public service announcements. We'll go around the other way. Councillor Thompson.
I did want to mention one thing with respect to last month's was the Mayor's Golf Tourney. For those that aren't aware, the Mayor's Golf Tourney was reestablished in 2011 and has run every year since, with the exception of last year and due to COVID. But, over these years, since I've been on council and participated in the tourney, it's raised, to the best of my understanding, almost $600,000 and helped over 50 organizations within our community. And really that total would be even greater if you were to add in the numbers from previous, when Mayor Tim Jones first started up. But I'm certainly not privy to those numbers. And I just, in the end, I recognize that a lot of work and a lot of time goes into the planning and the event, and wanted to offer my congratulations and appreciation to all of them, not just for this year, but for the many years in the past, because at the end of the day, this is money that goes back into our community. And I think it's wonderful.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I can't tell you because former Mayor Jones sits on the committee, and that number right from the beginning is close to 1.2 million that has gone back into our community to help those that are in need. So absolutely. And I'll pass along and share those kind words with the committee and everyone that's volunteered over the years. Any other PSA, Councillor Thompson? No, that's it. Councillor Gallo, PSA? Nope. Councillor Gardner, PSA?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to try this. Don't miss the spooktacular excitement at Aurora's Haunted Greenhouse and the Horror Playground and Treat Street. So that is happening starting Saturday night. And actually, it may be too late to register because it's going to be very tightly controlled about the number of people allowed in the greenhouse. But there's going to be a lot of decoration outside of the greenhouse, and I have no idea what the Treat Street is, but it sounds like it might be worth exploring for our local families, for all families, but especially our local families.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gilliland, public service announcement.
I'm not sure what the Treat Street thing was, but I'm going to talk about the Yonge Street Spooktacular, which I think is something different. This is something from, it was organized in collaboration with the Downtown Aurora BIA. It's a really cool idea where some of the stores are participating. There's a new store called Royal Rose Gallery, and I believe that there's going to be some sort of setup in there. I'm not really quite sure, but it was just kind of announced today, so I don't have all the details yet. But just if you go to the Downtown Aurora BIA website or their Instagram, I'm sure you can find it out. But there is an app that you can download from Neighbor, and you can scan various QR codes to kind of see all the action. And I think there's scavengers and all sorts of stuff going on. So just stay tuned for more of that. But I wanted to throw that out there because there's so much going on, and I'm sure the rest of us will have more things to say about some of the exciting things happening in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys, PSA.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just as a reminder, it's the second last Aurora Farmers Market and Artisan Fair this Saturday from 8 to 1. The last one is on the 30th. It's going to be an amazing couple of weekends. Don't miss it. It's always fantastic. Yes, Councillor Gilliland did mention, you'll notice that the BIA did a great job in decorating Machel's Alley. And I think that there's going to be some great events to point made earlier that the businesses will be participating and the residents can share in the fun as well. So that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kim, no public service announcement? Okay. Just have a few. Have you recently replaced a computer, phone, or television? Drop off all of your unwanted or obsolete electronic devices to be fully recycled at the Joint Operations Center on October 23rd between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And for more details, please visit aurora.ca/waste and recycling. Until October 24th, the town of Aurora is actively collaborating with local cultural organizations to highlight Aurora's arts and culture and heritage scene for Culture Days. For more information, visit aurora.ca/culture days. And for updates on Aurora Town Square, a key part of the town's exciting downtown revitalization plan, please visit engageaurora.ca/Aurora Town Square. Don't forget to subscribe to the consultation page to receive email updates. And with that, I will call for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Thompson, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries.